Hello, darlings. It is yet another podcast. This time for something that I have been planning to do for a very, very long time. A lot of other authors have audiobooks made of their books, and I don't really write a lot of prose because most of my energy is spent on the webcomic A Heavenly Bride right now. But I have the Black Wolf Silver Fox book, and I've often thought how neat it would be for it to be an audiobook, even though, quite frankly, I wrote this like way back when I didn't follow outlines and things, and I look at it now and I'm like, gosh, what a horrible thing. But so I can't really see turning it into an audiobook. I can't justify it even if I had the funds, which I don't. And I thought it would be fun if I did a series of casts, video casts, where I'm reading out of the book, kind of like an audiobook series, but it's video casts. And I'm going to start today with chapter 1. I'm only going to read a little bit of it because I'm going to keep these short. And I'm going to start with the disclaimer. Black Wolf Silver Fox isn't my best story. I broke a lot of guidelines when I wrote it, ones that I realize now should have been listened to in order to get a more cohesive story. It took me 10 years to edit, rewrite, and produce. Despite its failings, I am in love with at least one of the characters in a way that authors can't help but to fall in love with their creations. From time to time, I will reopen this book and look at the pages to remind myself of what happens within. I've had a sequel start on it for years now, and someday I swear I'm going to find the time to finish it, if life will allow it. I thank you for giving this book a chance, and I hope you enjoy. Chapter 1, Aramina. The moon hung full and bright over the thick canopy of the forest. Shafts of moonlight pierced the leaves to fall in dappled shades of gray onto the ground. Occasionally, there was a swish as underbrush was moved carefully aside to allow the passage of some nocturnal beast. Otherwise, the air was deadly quiet, as if the entire world were waiting. The black one ran silently through the trees, dodging the pale moonlight as if it were poison. She paused and sniffed to test the air and get her bearings. The moon called her onward. Through the trees and underbrush she rushed, across streamlets and pale meadows. The cries of her brethren followed as she loped along. They sang of family, kinship, and togetherness. They were the things she turned her back on now as other memories moved restlessly in her mind. Her ripped left ear throbbed, a warning from the pack leader. It would probably scar and serve as a permanent reminder. Suddenly, a clearing burst out of the trees. Not wanting to step out of the forest and be exposed, the black one halted and whined. Indecisively, she paced back and forth in the shadows. She could hear a familiar, flapping sound in the distance. Its presence nagged at her, although she only acknowledged it with a flick of her good ear. Her pacing slowed, then halted altogether as it grew louder. To herself, she growled a low warning before setting paw into the clearing before her. Something that looked like an old rag appeared suddenly in a nearby patch of moonlight. It circled the black one like trash caught in a whirlwind, dizzying her senses. Finally, it stopped flying to land in the clearing before her. She lowered her ears, crouched in place, and whined again. Her tail hung limply between her tensed legs. Either a flying bat or an old cloak, it was difficult to tell. It fluttered once by way of threat. Then it changed, lengthened, and gained mass until a handsome elf stood in its place. His green eyes sparkled above a sharp-toothed grin. "Aramina," said he. "Leaving so soon?" His grin mocked her. He had killed with those teeth. It was a matter of pride for him. Unimpressed, the black one made a sound that might have been a snort. "Come now," he said soothingly. "You and I are above this beastly behavior." Suddenly at ease, she sat and scratched her ears. Let him carry on the conversation by himself, her attitude seemed to say. Her unwelcome companion ignored the insult. Laughing, he crouched before her to wait. Clouds moved slowly past the moon, marking time. It was a very long time before the elf got bored enough to try again. "Shall we sit here all night?" Again the black one growled, and then she barked softly. She stood, circled a time or two, then faced her adversary. The elf leaned back, his smile widening as he watched her change. Similar to the one he had just undertaken, her emergence was deliberately slow. The first thing she did when done was to toss her long black hair and narrow one eye. Shadowed by the night, her deep brown eyes glittered like obsidian. With a voice like a deep howl, she said, "Speak and be quick." "You've been feral too long," the elf said calculatingly. "Where are your manners?" "I don't have time for manners." She stood naked, for she had long ago dispensed with such trivial things. The chill in the air made her shiver. It would only get colder before dawn, but she preferred not to think about it. The elf sighed. How like her, business before pleasure. "Where are you going?" he asked unenthusiastically. They both knew the answer. Aramina looked past him toward the moonlit clearing. "Grever," she said slowly, as if she found speaking to be painful, "what is it you want?" Grever continued to smile, but now the expression looked sad somehow. He shook his head, freeing a brown cowlick into his eyes. Aramina had found that painfully attractive ages ago, but now she could only remember why or even how they met. That was the price of immortality. One could forget and never learn from their mistakes and go insane from the burden of memory. Aramina had been happy living with the pack and feeling the bliss of pure wildness. If Grever's occasional visits did not remind her that she was more than a mere lupine, she would have forgotten herself forever. That would be too easy, she thought with narrowing eyes. Grever was waiting, watching her warily. The choices she made tonight would affect him as much as her. Regardless of that responsibility, she intended to plunge onward. She was not the naive girl of long ago and would no longer sacrifice time for another's comfort. Of all people, Grever should know that. "Let me pass," Aramina snapped. Chin high, she took a step forward. Their shoulders brushed each other. He gripped her arm suddenly and jerked her back in one violent motion. She gasped in pain, ducking a little to protect her ears. Involuntarily, her eyes met his and locked. Then, shamefully, Aramina looked away and toward the ground. Angrily, Grever pushed her away. "Go then," he said, his voice choked with pain and anger. "I won't stop you." Something fluttered, swept upward, and touched her cheek. By the time Aramina dared to look up, Grever was gone back to the wood. Her pack had fallen silent. Everything was quiet again but for the soft crunch of leaves under her feet as she timidly walked forward. Aramina rubbed her cheek where Grever had kissed her. When the moonlight hit her naked flesh, it set her aglow as if she were a goddess. Around her, the darkness held back as if it knew how unreachable she truly were. Her eyes remained focused on the clearing's center, a dark area the moonlight could not touch. There was an ancient altar there. It was made from piled weathered stones and was stained dark with the blood of countless sacrifices. 3 rings of weathered stones, each marked with sigils of forgotten spirits, surrounded it. Aramina could not remember what the sigils were for or who they named, except one. She paused when she reached the first ring of stones and touched it with a single finger. "Mine," she whispered. Her heart hammered in her chest. It was a long time before she could bring herself to step over the first ring and into this unholy yet somehow sacred place. The second ring of stones was even harder to cross, as if something pushed her back. Aramina held her breath when she stepped over the third and final ring. With the altar now just feet away, her soul shuddered. Mortal eyes could not see the energy that flicked over the darkest part of the center. She smelled the energy in the same way she saw it. For an instant she could not think of how to react. Then she remembered, as if instinct needed only the excuse to come alive. Her knees buckled and she sank to the ground. Pressing her face to the earth, she touched the altar base with sweaty fingertips. A shock ran up her arms and sent spasms to her toes. Atop the altar, a bright flame burst mysteriously to life, chasing away the shadows. Inwardly, Aramina groaned, as her every nerve was set on fire. To acknowledge this torture was to forfeit her life, as she could not do that yet. She bit her lip, tasted blood, and stayed perfectly still, even when a spark jumped from the fire and burned a hole in her wrist. "Rise," a deep voice commanded. It came from everywhere, the ground, the trees, even her mind. She obeyed, resisting the urge to brush off her soiled knees. The flame flickered before her, capturing her gaze and holding it. Something invaded her skull, read it, then withdrew. Although she had expected and almost welcomed it, She still felt raped. Revulsion tightened her stomach. "Speak," said the voice. "Lord," the face said before choking. She swallowed, but a moment passed before she found her voice again. "I would ask a boon for your loyal servant." "Ask." "I want to go home," she said as quickly as she dared. "At least for 2 seasons." "Silence!" The air crackled with the command. Despite herself, Aramina flinched and awaited her punishment. The air was pregnant with expectancy. "You may go," the rumbling voice said after a while. "It pleases me that you do." "Lord?" Hope filled Aramina's eyes and moistened them with unshed tears. "I have an errand for you. Your companions will await." Aramina nodded her head dutifully and bowed again. Within her mind, the voice methodically explained. Memories, left slumbering for ages, rose screaming to the top of her mind. Helpless, Aramina could only watch history replay behind her eyes. And that's the first part. Benefit to me reading this like this and doing these is I'm seeing places that I'm wanting to fix where I made errors in the book and spelling mistakes. So this is actually a good thing, and I hope to continue, but each reading is going to be short because, as you can tell, I do tend to stutter a little, which is funny because when I'm reading lines in a play or something, I don't have this issue. It's just whenever I'm trying to read a book. So thumbs up. I hope you enjoy, and I hope I'm able to do these regularly in the future. See you next time.